2009, Muammar Gaddafi stood at the United Nations and said something out loud that you're not supposed to say, fella. He said capitalist companies create viruses so they can sell you the vaccines. He said medicine should be free. But 2 years later, he was dead, dragged through the streets, killed on camera, and his country was bombed back into chaos by a coalition of NATO powers. The official story is that he was a brutal dictator and the West liberated his people. But the real story is about gold and water and a plan that terrified every central bank on Earth.
A man stands at the UN and says Big Pharma invents diseases to sell cures. 2 years later, he's dead and his country's in ruins. Giggity, that's either the worst coincidence in history or it isn't a coincidence.
Peter, Gaddafi was a dictator. Everyone knows that. The West intervened to protect civilians.
Then look at what those civilians had before the intervention, Cleveland. Free healthcare, free education, including studying abroad on the state's money. The government paid $1,000 a year per family member, but newly married couples received $64,000 toward a home. New parents received $7,000 for every child. The petrol cost 14 cents a liter, cheaper than water. Starting a business got you a grant, no interest on loans for cars or homes. Libya had the highest GDP per capita in Africa. But before 1969, 3/4 of Libyans couldn't read. By 2009, literacy was near 90%. That's what the West liberated them from.
The numbers are verifiable. Libya under Gaddafi had one of the highest standards of living in Africa, with free healthcare, free education, heavy social subsidies, and a GDP per capita higher than countries like Russia, Brazil, and China at the time. The state owned the oil and distributed the revenue directly to the population. No national debt, no IMF loans, no foreign central bank controlling the currency. For a country that was one of the poorest in the world in the 1950s, that transformation is a documented historical fact, which raises the obvious question. If the people were housed, educated, employed, and literate, who exactly was being liberated, and from what?
Free healthcare, free education, no debt, cheaper fuel than water. Giggity, I'm starting to understand why they needed saving so urgently.
So if it wasn't about the people, what was it actually about?
Gold. Gaddafi had a plan to launch a single African currency backed by gold, the gold dinar. Every oil-producing African and Middle Eastern nation would sell their oil and resources in gold dinars instead of US dollars. Think about what that means. Since the 1970s, the entire global oil trade has run on the dollar. That's what gives the dollar its value. Every country on Earth needs dollars to buy oil. Gaddafi's plan would have created an alternative, an entire continent stepping off the dollar and onto gold.
The dollar hasn't been backed by gold since 1971. It's backed by one thing. Oil is priced in dollars, so every nation has to hold dollars to buy it. Gaddafi sat on 143 tons of gold to back his dinar. A currency backed by real gold beats a currency backed by an agreement. Every nation that switched would be choosing value over a promise. That's an existential threat to the entire dollar system.
Imagine the whole world has to use your casino chips to buy gas. Then one guy starts handing out gold instead. Giggity, you don't argue with him. You burn down his casino.
So the gold alone was enough to make him a target.
The gold was only half of it, Cleveland. Then there's the water. Libya is 90% desert, but underneath that desert sits the Nubian sandstone aquifer, the largest reserve of fresh water on the planet. Fossil water. Gaddafi built a great man-made river, 4,000 kilometers of pipeline moving fresh water from beneath the Sahara to the cities. The largest irrigation project in human history. He called it the 8th wonder of the world, and he wasn't planning to stop at Libya. The plan was to green the desert, to turn Africa from a continent that imports food into a continent that exports it.
The aquifer holds the equivalent of roughly 500 years of the Nile's flow. With the dollar already under threat from the gold dinar, imagine the second layer. A nation that controls its own water, grows its own food, and trades in its own gold-backed currency doesn't need Western loans, Western food aid, or the Western banking system. Libya was about to become the proof that it could be done, and a working example is more dangerous than any army because other nations don't follow threats, they follow results.
Free water, free food, gold money, no debt. Giggity, he wasn't a threat to Libya at all. He was a threat to the business model of the entire planet.
So you're saying the whole 2011 intervention, the no-fly zone, the bombing, was about this, not about protecting anyone.
Not about protecting anyone, Cleveland, about stopping exactly this. In early 2011, the uprising started. By March, NATO was bombing. By August, the capital fell, and NATO planes specifically bombed the great man-made river pipeline facilities, the water infrastructure, civilian water supply. There is no military justification for destroying a water project, unless the water itself was part of what had to be stopped. Gaddafi predicted it himself at a ceremony for the river. He said, now that we've achieved this, the threats from the US will double. They'll do everything to destroy our work.
Within months of Gaddafi's death, the gold was gone. The gold dinar plan died with him. The great man-made river fell into disrepair without maintenance. Libya, once the most prosperous nation in Africa, fractured into competing militias and open-air slave markets. The country never recovered. And the dollar's position as the global oil currency was never challenged again. Whatever you believe about the man, the outcome was precisely what the system required.
Gaddafi wasn't removed for any of the reasons they gave you, and he was removed because he built something the system cannot allow any single nation to have. Gold instead of debt, water instead of dependence, independence instead of obedience. They didn't kill a dictator, they killed a precedent, because if it worked in Libya, every other nation on Earth would have asked why it couldn't work for them too.
They bombed the water supply of a country to save its people. Giggity. And then wrote the history books that call him the villain. The man who gave away free water is the bad guy. Sure.